I haven't posted a really good list video in a while. A list that accurately represents my reading taste or how my reading taste has evolved over the years. And I think for this to really have the impact that I hope it would, and it's not that serious, I get it, it's a reading list, but to sort of illustrate how a reading journey evolves and changes. It changes as your sentiments change, as your preferences change, as your taste changes. And as those things evolve, as you kind of get older and dabble in different things, at least I guess from my own experience, as I've dabbled in different things, the books that have really stuck with me have changed quite a bit. I think if I were to make this video about a year ago, you'd see books like Shogun or Pillars of the Earth in a video like this. And those books are great. I've thoroughly enjoyed them. But I've read some books that I think are better, that actually serve me in a better way and have shaped my reading taste quite a bit over the past year or 2 years. So I've got 4 books here that for very different reasons have stuck with me and have been really impactful for me in my reading journey. I'm going to start off with the book that I know nobody has really ever heard of, and that frankly might be part of the reason why I enjoy it so much. There's something innate in us as humans that when we come across something that we know other people aren't super aware of, we gravitate towards it because we want to feel different, we want to feel special and unique. And I understand that. That's part of the process, that's part of it. And there might be an element of that with this book, but the book is Vietnam Percy by W.D. Earhart. Well, it says on the front, it's a combat Marine memoir in Vietnam in 1968. When I did a podcast on the Vietnam War, this was one of my favorite sources that I read for it. And it wasn't for all the typical reasons. It was because this book stuck to me. It's poetic and it's literary. And I think it's everything that a combat memoir should be. But if you're going to do a list of all the best combat memoirs ever, this one's probably not going to be on the list because most people just aren't aware of it. You're going to look at Storm of Steel by Ernst Junger. You're going to look at With the Old Breed by E.B. Sledge. Those are going to be your, King of the Hill combat memoirs. And I think this is right there with them. Earhart takes part in the battle in Hue in 1968. He's involved in the Tet Offensive. But more than the stuff he takes part in, there's this sense of just ongoing dread as his buddies are killed or injured over and over and over again. And you have this feeling like he's going to be next. And it's just doomy and gloomy and really depressing and haunting. And I think that the way that he's able to accurately depict his experience in Vietnam, because I feel what he's feeling when he's in Vietnam better than any other book. I mean, there's, the bestsellers like your Tim O'Brien's and your Marlantis's and, all those books are great. But this one illustrated the experience of being in Vietnam better than any of those other books. And it just clung to me. The prose is excellent. I mean, the way he describes, there's a moment when his company's ambushed in the Battle of Hue, and the way he describes it, it's so haunting. And you just, after 250 pages of his buddies getting killed and civilians getting killed, and just like this awful thing after another, it's almost this culmination of awfulness that sort of sets the cornerstone of the narrative. And it's an excellent book. I can't sing this book's praises enough. It needs to be talked about more. Everybody should read it if you have an interest in war or in history. But more than that, I think you just get a sense of like the extreme of human experience, which that is what this book is. In the same vein, in a history vein, I've got The Peloponnesian War by Thucydides. This one's very simple. If you read ancient history, Herodotus, for example, or Xenophon, you're going to expect a certain element of mysticism or myth or, the gods take part in the narrative. And, Herodotus writes about Xerxes whipping the ocean because the ocean won't cooperate with him. And it's just, you read stuff and it's clearly not true, but because you have no other corroborating sources to sort of tell you this did or did not happen, you just have their word for it. It becomes part of the legend. But like instinctively, okay, that probably didn't happen, but it's there and you've got it and you just sort of deal with it. Thucydides is different. It's history. I was talking to a buddy last week and I was telling him that if this book came out and it had Max Hastings' name on it instead of Thucydides, it would fit right in with any other history being written in 2010. If you had an eyewitness account of the Peloponnesian War that came out in 2026, and you had an American guy's name put to it, where maybe he was a journalist or a correspondent and he just, spent 10 years or whatever under deep cover in the Peloponnesian War, that's what this would be. I mean, it reads so modern, and it sort of blows your mind a little bit because you kind of go in there expecting all the myths and the gods and stuff, and then it's just a run-of-the-mill history book. And that in and of itself sort of blows your mind. There's speeches and things like that. It's not wholly a 2026 history. It was written in the 400s BCE. So there's stuff in there that's a little funky, but it is remarkably modern. And it's because this format of writing history is the basis for all of history that's been written since that book. And so it's a landmark book. It's a must read if you have any interest in history or anything like that. But it's almost shocking because you're like, wow, this is like super readable and understandable. And there's nothing funky happening, and it's history. It's great. Admittedly, I finished this book like 3 days ago, and it's so good. I feel like I've been introduced to a whole section of books by reading this book. It's thematically interesting. The prose is incredible. It is White Noise by Don DeLillo. It's a story about a guy who is a professor of Hitler studies at a university, and it's basically the story of him and his wife reckoning with their own fear of death. It sounds really depressing. I was trying to describe it to my wife at the dinner table the other night, and I didn't do a very good job describing it, but it's not just a book about death. It's also a book about life, and the dialogue is incredibly witty, and it's fun, and there's also kind of a climactic moment at the end where there's some action, and it's a lot of different things in one book. It's a really interesting reading experience, and I had a great time with it. It's not so experimental that you get kind of lost in the weeds, but it's also an incredibly incisive look at human nature. And also, DeLillo just has a way of describing things that are so true. I mean, there are paragraphs in here that I highlighted that you read it and you just go, that's such an interesting way of describing that specific thing. And I get it. Like, I'm tracking and I understand what you're saying, but I have never heard anybody describe it that way before. And it's just a great eye-opening kind of experience reading sentences and paragraphs like that. And you go, okay, I need more of this. This is great. So I need more DeLillo in my life. Last one here should be no surprise whatsoever to anybody who has kept up with me on the many different social platforms and whatever, but it is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. As you can tell, my copy is well-loved and well-worn. This book, to me, was everything that I thought those epic stories that I was reading before, it's everything those epic fantasy stories are, but it's more so. I had such a blast with these characters. Gus and Call, their relationship is the central spine of this whole book. It's how they hate each other, but they're an old married couple. I mean, they love each other and they're there and they have each other's back, but they have a firm moral code and a way of living that is rigid. And it's so admirable that they have this framework that they, live their life through, but they're also kind of mischievous and they are wrestlers and, they're rough around the edges, I guess. It's the dialogue, it's the relationships, but it's also the juxtaposition between Gus and Call and Jake Spoon and how they've all shared life experience with one another. And yet when push comes to shove, there is a moral framework that Gus and Call live by that Jake Spoon doesn't, not to spoil anything, but there's a comment on human nature in there that like we all have our own moral failings. And yet, even Gus and Call, they have moral failings and they're not perfect and they're very real and raw, but it's relatable and understandable. And it's kind of like this everyman sort of a story. It's, I think, an American classic. It had a revitalization this summer for very good reason. I don't know why it wasn't maybe as popular as it got. And I don't even know what it was that caused it to get so popular. I think it was just somebody picked it up and was like, wow, this is great. I picked it up. Other people picked it up and we started shouting its praises because it is an awesome book. And I think it's a must read. for anybody who reads anything. I mean, everybody would find something in this book, I think. So anyway, that's my really long-winded book recommendations video, sort of a deal. Shameless plug here at the end. I do have sort of a book club kind of a thing I'm doing with my Substack newsletter. We're reading a lot of different books. White Noise was one of the books we read recently. And if you want to hop in with this book club as we're reading other things, I've got plans for what we're going to be reading in 2026 and beyond. So if you want to hop in and you want to read with other readers, we do some Zoom discussions a couple times a month as well. If that sounds interesting to you, click the link in my bio and go hop over there and support me on Substack. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.